Well, Qantas is apologising to workers it sacked during the pandemic after the High Court ruled today that the airline's outsourcing of jobs was unlawful. In a statement, the airline said a prior decision by the federal court has ruled out reinstatement of workers, but it will now consider penalties for the breach and compensation for relevant employees, which will factor in redundancy payments already made by Qantas. Well, let's bring in tonight's political panel, National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie and Labor MP Andrew Charlton. Bridget, should Qantas have to pay back its subsidies, seeing as it sacked these workers? It was unlawful to do so.
Well, obviously we note the decision of the High Court that Qantas breached those general protections within the Fair Work Act when they sacked workers, over 1,700 workers recently. Now, that is an issue for the Qantas board, and I think the High Court's ruling shows that their behaviour has been reprehensible and reckless, and I think the decision lies fairly and squarely at the feet of former CEO Alan Joyce and obviously the board. And in terms of the JobKeeper supplements that were paid to Qantas during COVID, that was part of a larger strategy right across the country to keep workers connected to their industry and their employer. And we would not have recovered as quickly as we did comparatively to the rest of the world had those payments not been in place. Now, Qantas has done the wrong thing here. It's breached the Fair Work Act, and I think it needs to be supporting its former employees, and I know that they'll be taking further action if reports late this evening.
Okay,
One thing that has become clear though, Sharri.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, let's bring in Andrew. How poorly did Qantas treat their workers while the airline was at the same time receiving hundreds of millions of dollars in government subsidies?
Well, as Bridget said, Qantas treated their workers reprehensibly. But what is interesting is that although Qantas says they treated them poorly now, back when Qantas was in the middle of firing those workers, the former Liberal government was supporting Qantas to the hilt. The former Industrial Relations Minister said that Qantas sacking its workers was, quote, a good model. Senator Cash said that Qantas was, quote, entitled to fire those workers. And what we've learned today is that Qantas was not entitled to fire those workers. In fact, the Liberal government was throwing those workers under the bus. And the question for Bridget and the Liberal government today is why, when they were giving billions of dollars to Qantas with no strings attached, why did they not at least suggest that Qantas look after their workers rather than causing them to run down their entitlements and at the end of their holiday pay be summarily fired? That's the question today.
All right,
it's good for Bridget to call Qantas's behaviour reprehensible, but back in the day, she was supporting them. Very
quick response there, Bridget.
Well, anybody wants to know who's supporting who, you need to not look no further than the bromance between former CEO Alan Joyce and our current Prime Minister. It's been a very cosy stitch-up. The support for the Yes campaign by this company and by the former CEO Alan Joyce, and the government's decision to block the Qatar Airways incoming flights that would have meant Australians had access to cheaper air flights and greater choice of destination.
All right, even more videos are emerging of the Voice architect Marcia Langton accusing Australians of racism. Andrew, aren't these accusations of racism from Langton unhelpful to the Yes campaign 4 weeks out?
Well, we need to have a respectful debate about the Voice to Parliament referendum, and both sides need to be respectful. Now, we've seen regrettable comments from the No campaign chair, Gary Johns, who suggested that Indigenous people should be subject to blood testing, who said that we should have a national holiday to celebrate interracial marriages. This debate needs to be about the issues. It needs to be about what's best for Australia, not about attacks one way or the other. And for me, those issues are simple. The issue is that an Indigenous mum is 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than a non-Indigenous mum. There is nearly a 10-year gap in life expectancy between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. These are the issues that we need to be debating in this referendum, not attacks and not disrespectful language.
And those comments by Gary Johns were despicable. Bridget, Labor attacked the government today for exploiting fear. What's your response to the Sydney Morning Herald's report that the No campaign is using fear and emotion to win over undecided voters?
Yeah, I note the Prime Minister's office sent Jason Clare out quite early when these claims were being made, saying, these terrible people that believe in the No campaign, it's all a lie, there won't be reparations, etc., using fear to incite a no outcome. Well, you can't have it both ways. The government either wants to say that the Voice will make up its own advisory comments, it will give advice to government as it sees fit, or the Voice is an independent advisory body that will be making claims to the federal executive government. The reality is that over time, any voice that is set up through the Constitution will absolutely be making claims of reparations to a future federal government. And the current government can't rule out that they won't. By calling people liars doesn't make it a truth. I think we do have to have a respectful debate, but it also has to be one that is factual. And I think the government is doing everything it can, pulling out all stops, personal attacks at both a ministerial level and a community level, which is actually trying to, divide Australians more than they need to be. People need to make up their own minds in the privacy of the ballot box on the day, and they shouldn't be bullied by the federal government.